going to do this today is that we have three speakers who are expert, namely Dr. McHardy, who's from Aberdeen, Dr. James Wright from the University of Calgary, and Dr. Chris Reddy here from the Dallalaina School at the University of Toronto. They will each, in succession, speak for 30 minutes, even though Dr. McHardy will do it in two pieces because he wants to do the pre-Toronto Aberdeen story and the post-Toronto Aberdeen story, and we'll do it so he'll speak first and last. We'll give sufficient time for discussion, and we have a number of people who are here who we've asked to be discussants as they feel they have something to add to the scene. So I would like to begin, though, by
this significant medical breakthrough. Of course, the discovery of insulin and the story of Banting, Best, Macleod, and Collip illustrates many things about scientific discoveries. And of course, a lot of history, a lot of work done before it, and a lot of work after it. We certainly also know that this is teamwork. All of us are engaged in team science now more than ever. And team work not only involves amazing scientists and collaborators, but also partners as well. And of course, the insulin story is not only about University of Toronto, two amazing departments, Physiology, I see our colleagues here, Department of Medicine, but also Toronto General Hospital, now part of UHN, and Sick Kids, a remarkable partnership which continues to this day and really allows us to hopefully come up with the next great discovery. We do really have to thank all of the people who have contributed to this work, including those that fund research, as well as those involved in the labs and clinics as well. We celebrate the discovery of Banting, Best, Macleod, and Collip, not only for their discovery of insulin, but the fact that they made such a huge impact into chronic disease, as well as putting Canada, a young country then, on the map globally as a place where great things could happen. And I think this has been a part of our foundational story in Canada and is something which is immensely wonderful and for which we are very proud. It's not only a story of Canada, but it also involves many other countries, Scotland as well. We do know that Dr. Macleod was the Associate Dean of Medicine here, but then went to Aberdeen, was the Dean of Medicine there, and had an amazing tenure while he was there. I'd just like to end by thanking Peter Copland and the Toronto Medical Historical Club for organizing and hosting this event, and for this ongoing work to raise the profile of the remarkable Professor Macleod. I wish you all a great workshop. Thank you all for attending, and greetings on behalf of the University of Toronto. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
It's a great
Honour to
be here today as a guest of the Toronto Medical History Club. To tell you something about Macleod, and as John has explained, I will do it in two parts. The pre-insulin story bit and then the back in Aberdeen bit are my slides. Here we go. So J.J.R. Macleod from Aberdeen to Toronto, the making physiologist and educator and mentor and administrator was too much to put in the slide. Sources and credits are important, and my main source will be Michael Williams' biography, J.J.R. Macleod, the co-discoverer of insulin. It's only been published once in 1993 as a supplement to the proceedings of the Royal College of Physicians of Edinburgh, but I've recently got some money and I've been working with Dr. Williams in his care home, and we're hoping to have this reprinted before too long. The other major source, of course, that we can't look past is Michael Bliss's wonderful book. We heard quite a lot about him yesterday, and it was largely due to his support that Michael Williams produced the Macleod biography. There are many other people who have been sources of the information that I'll share, including the City Council, the Aberdeen Grammar School magazine, a variety of journal archives, members of the Macleod family, the University of Aberdeen, and of course my fellow presenters this morning, Jim Wright and Chris Rutty. Chris has written a mountain of stuff, and I've read most of the way to the summit of the mountain in the last few months. So the timeline of my presentation is as follows. First, Macleod was born 6th September 1876 near Dunkeld, so not in Aberdeen, about 150 kilometres away near in Perthshire. And that was on the eve of his parents' first wedding anniversary. By the age of 7, the family moved to Aberdeen. His father was a clergyman, as we'll see, and that was when he took up a charge. Then he went to school, and that was Aberdeen Grammar School. And by autumn 1893, he enrolled as a medical student at the University of Aberdeen. He graduated in 1898, and under the influence of his physiological mentor, who we'll see in a moment, he elected to pursue a career in physiology and began his training period, I would call it, with a year in Leipzig, then back to Aberdeen, then to London for a few years before he was headhunted by the Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio, and moved across the Atlantic in 1903. And that was where, as an established physiologist, he developed his interest in carbohydrate metabolism, which was flourishing. In summer 1918, he moved to Toronto, and that's when a whole new chapter begins. But my story will end prior to the 8th of November, which was Banting's first visit to see Macleod. And along the bottom of the screen, I've got Macleod's age at each of these points in my tale. So the road to Aberdeen, Reverend Robert Macleod, he was born in Caithness, which is up really in the top right-hand corner of Scotland. And he had come to Aberdeen, studied an arts degree and was a teacher, and went to theological college for classes. And by 1876, via a mission in Dundee, he had gone to Cluny, where he took his first charge as a free church minister in the Church of Scotland. And that's where J.J.R. was born. 3 years later, they moved to a place called Keith, which is something like 80 kilometres north of Aberdeen. And then 4 years after that, late 1883, they came to Aberdeen, and that's the house that Macleod lived in. That's the door that the little boy came through for his first day at Aberdeen Grammar School, which is just across the road, down Short Loanings, through Leadside Road, and ahead of you there. In fact, here it is. This ancient school, established in 1256, was rebuilt with this fine granite building in 1863. So the building was just over 20 years old when Macleod attended there. And this is the first picture I have of Macleod at the age of about 9 at Aberdeen Grammar School. And I don't know if it tells us anything about his fortitude, but that looks quite a fierce schoolmistress with a very fierce hat in the middle. So he did well to excel at school, win many prizes, even on the sporting field. And then he proceeded to Aberdeen University, where miraculously the 1893 has got hidden behind the university crest, but hey, that's not bad out of this many slides. So the University of Aberdeen was established in 1495 at King's College, and this set of buildings, Marischal College, opened as a separate university in 1593, and the two establishments merged in 1860. So this is in the city centre. The obelisk in the front is a memorial to Sir James MacGregor, who was a famous military surgeon, and it got relocated to Duthie Park, miles away, when this building was developed. But that's where Macleod went to study. And here in the shadows is Professor John McWilliam, who was the professor of physiology at the time, and a very much ahead of his time cardiac physiologist whose work, anticipated things such as ventricular fibrillation as a cause of sudden death, direct current shock. And he had worked in Leipzig with Carl Ludwig at the Physiological Institute. And so it's little doubt that Macleod, who was impressed by this chap, went on to study there. So John Macleod graduated with honourable distinction in 1898 and competed for the Anderson Travelling Scholarship, which took him to Leipzig. So in the trainee physiologist period, we have his first year at the Physiological Institute, and then he's back to the infirmary buildings at Wilman Hill. And in 1900, he moved on to the London Hospital Medical College, first as a demonstrator in physiology. Then he won a Royal Society Mackinnon Fellowship, and that paid his salary for another couple of years. And he was promoted lecturer in biochemistry, and later was the chemical pathologist to the hospital laboratory, because he had a major developing interest in chemical physiology, chemical pathology, which was a growing subject at the time. So in terms of his research output, we've got no evidence from what we can find that he studied German at school, but his first scientific paper was written in German from his time in Leipzig. Maybe he found a local to help him write it. This was on the phosphor content of muscle. Then his work back in Aberdeen that was presented to the Physiological Society just about the time he moved to London on metabolism of creatinine. And then working with Leonard Hill, who was his senior in London, animal studies looking at cerebral circulation. They also did studies on physical effects and physiological effects of raised pressure, which meant he had a number of dalliances with caisson disease and that sort of work. And then a variety of other things. In this paper here, hydrolysis of fats in vitro by means of steopsin, which I think is probably lipase in modern language, is his first dalliance with the pancreas. So that's just a sample of the work that he was doing. Now, in addition, he developed a passion for writing, and here in 1902 is the first volume he was involved in producing with 4 London colleagues, Practical Physiology. And this was again to be a major strand of his career, writing textbooks. And this very copy, Michael Williams obtained from the librarian at our medical school, and there inscribed in the front leaf, in his own hand, Miss Mary McWalter, in recognition of her contributions from Jack, November the 10th, 1902. This was to be the future Mrs. Macleod. In 1903, an account of his prowess as an organizer, a teacher, a researcher, and now an author, he was invited to take up the vacant chair of physiology at Western Reserve University in Cleveland. So he and Mary married in Paisley, near Glasgow, in July 1903, and in the last week of August 1903, which was still a few days short of his 27th birthday, they set sail for the New World. Now, in Cleveland, he started teaching chemistry, biochemistry, and physiology, and he was researching purine metabolism and uric acid metabolism and carbamates. But then he got to work on the next textbook, which came out in 1906, again with Leonard Hill, who he had worked with in London. And this book saw him contributing all of the chapters on metabolic diseases and carbohydrates in particular. And we suspect that's what got him started on the track, because when he would have been preparing those papers, his first contribution published in Science on experimental glycosuria appeared in 1905. And from then on, his research focus was very much on carbohydrate metabolism. And the most amazing series of papers, the first and last are given here, are 12 contributions published in the American Journal of Physiology between 1907 and 1917, looking at the relationship between experimental glycosuria and a variety of endocrine and neural systems. So he was much in demand, not just because of his research work, but because he was a a well-regarded and lucid speaker. And thus, in 1910, for example, he was invited to speak to the American Medical Association in St. Louis. 2 years later, he went back to the London hospital for a 2-month sabbatical, during which he delivered 8 advanced physiology lectures on aspects of carbohydrate metabolism. Valentine's Day 1914, he was speaking to the Harvey Society in New York on, again, his glycosuria work. And that very year, he was also invited to perhaps, arguably, even more prestigious city of Aberdeen in Scotland, where he gave this paper to the British Medical Association meeting that was held there that year, the same week as the First World War broke out. So that was to be his last visit to the UK for some time. Other work that he produced, in 1913, he produced this monograph, largely based on the work that had led up to the series of lectures in London. So this was a monograph series, and he wrote Diabetes, Its Pathological Physiology, 1913. He produced another textbook, Fundamentals of Human Physiology, this time with Roy Pierce, who had worked with him for a time in Cleveland and had then moved on to Illinois. And the following year, they produced a companion volume for dental students. Now, he also got involved in work related to the First World War effort. So he worked on gas masks and the emerging subject of aviation physiology, and also on community nutrition. And one version is published somewhat oddly in the International Journal of Orthodontics, but this is just a version of a paper which was a war pamphlet produced. And this is about principles involved in economic readjustment of dietaries. So in some ways, he was laying the foundation for the science that developed as dietetics. Then came the move to Toronto. And he was a bit reluctant to come at first. He's reportedly said that his wife hadn't been so well. I don't know much about that. But Sir Robert Faulkner, president of the University of Toronto, was very ambitious for this establishment, which already had excellent laboratory facilities, etc., and persevered and filled the post temporarily and kept the option of getting Macleod open. And in 1918, he moved to Toronto. And his early achievements there included his magnum opus, I suppose, Physiology and Biochemistry in Modern Medicine, which ran to 7 editions in his lifetime and maybe 10 or 11 editions beyond his lifetime. And he'd finished that just about the time he moved. And then something for education buffs. In the Canadian Medical Association Journal, he produced this paper on medical education in 1920. So lots of us who think we have great new original ideas would perhaps get a shock if we read that, because he wanted more practical classes. He extended the course, medicine course, to 6 years, but he argues for all sorts of things that I thought were crazy ideas lately that people struggled to get through the establishment. And that was to include atypical courses in the training of the rounded medic. So the students had something like 5, what we would now call elective topics, and at least 2 of them had to be subjects that were not normally part of the medical curriculum. He was elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Canada in 1919, member of the Royal Canadian Institute for Science 1920, and in 2021 was president-elect of the American Physiology Society, becoming its 9th president the year later. So in November 1920, and we're just talking about the first week of November 1920, we have got Macleod with his maple leaf stem adorned with the German flag of the day, Scottish flag, English flag, and the United States flag. And he's now firmly in Canada. He's a well-established, well-regarded physiologist with a huge track record of publications. He's clearly embraced academic practice and principles. He's an educator who's soon to become, or had become, Associate Dean of the Medical Faculty in Toronto, and had been writing on medical education, had been involved in developing a new medical school in Cleveland. He'd clearly developed many administrative tasks, and perhaps most importantly, for what we're to hear next, he was well regarded as a mentor who encouraged people who came to him with their ideas. So I would move that in the first week of November 1920, it's difficult to see how anyone in the whole world could have prepared themselves better to be involved in a challenge to develop the treatment for diabetes. And I'll be back later.
Thank you very much, Dr. So we just heard a very powerful lecture of the stepwise development of J.J.R. Macleod, and it's a remarkable and precise story. So we have now a few minutes for questions. So I want to ask if any of our discussants have a question to ask to Professor McHardy about what he's just reported. Do I see any hands up? Dr. Friedman, Jeff Friedman.
Yeah, I think the question was about the conceptual advances in glycosuria. It's an interesting issue because much of the physiological techniques, etc., were in the process of development, and Macleod was very interested in developing experimental techniques, even in his high pressure work. There's a piece of equipment, is there not, that he developed that's in a museum somewhere in Cleveland that he used for his own experiments. So he covered a wide range of things, from the effects of neural stimulation on insulin production, on lactate production, on different factors that influence the experimental glycosuria, really wide ranging. It's sometimes said that Macleod wasn't much of an endocrinologist and didn't really believe in hormones, which I find incredible, because of course his textbooks were always up to date, explaining endocrinology, which was an evolving subject during the 1900s and beyond. So I think that he had contributed quite a bit to this variety of topics. And if you look at the 12 papers, they're all on different things. But I think that it was certainly commensurate with the view that the pancreas may well have a primary role, but not necessarily believing that only the pancreas had a role, and whether a pancreatic factor affected something else or something else affected a pancreatic factor was open.
Dr. Angel.
Do we have any information about his approach? Excuse me. Do we have any information about his recruitment of faculty members in the pre-insulin period? That is the first 2 years of his life at U of T.
Not much specific information. What we know is that he was certainly on board with the idea of improving the medical school, which would have meant trying to recruit staff members. But he also was attractive to scientists who wanted to come and do pre and postdoctoral work here as well.
Dr. Chris Reddy.
I can. My question is about, when did Dr. Macleod start getting involved with the doctoral journal, editing journals, getting on editorial boards? Because by the time when I get into my part, I'll talk a bit about that later on, but I wasn't sure if he was doing that before, because it seems to be an important thing.
He started that in London. In fact, one of the odd things is that when he was still a demonstrator in physiology, he had been recruited by Professor McWilliam to be an external examiner for the undergraduate medical course. So he was already contributing and started editing, reviewing papers for journals in his London years. And that continued and expanded. And indeed, he was still doing that at the time of his death
Yeah, because you got involved with new journals too, as they were coming out of this. at that time.
McHardy, I have a question. So yesterday, Dr. Friedman discussed in great deal in a stepwise fashion all the various scientists who try to make extracts of the pancreas to see if there was a substance that it could affect hyperglycemia. What writings before November 1920 of Macleod addressed that question?
I think all of his review work included these options. Fortunately, I'd just say that Dr. Friedman didn't tell us about all the workers yesterday, because if there were 400, if Michael Bliss was correct, then he wouldn't be finished yet. But certainly the main workers had been referred to. And in Macleod's papers, he is always pretty up to date in including reference to all of these other workers as having made contributions towards the tale.
Did he mention specifically not only Minkowski, but Zeltzer?
Yes, he knew about these, although perhaps these were more written when he started the insulin production work, because his focus, you see, was on physiological explanations of regulation of carbohydrate metabolism. And he was very pointed to always say that he was studying glycosuria and not diabetes. So for example, when von Mering and Minkowski produced hyperglycemia in a dog by removing its pancreas, Macleod would have been very fussy to say these were features consistent with the same clinical appearance as diabetes, but he wouldn't call it diabetes because one didn't know then what diabetes really was.
Further questions? Thank you very much, Dr. McHardy.